There are nights when I wish I'd never answered that call. Nights when I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'll ever feel normal again. My name's Officer Daniel Mason, and I've been with the department for over 10 years. Long enough to think I'd seen it all: domestic disputes, drug busts, even a couple of shootings. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened on the night of October 14th. It started like any other graveyard shift: quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel the world is holding its breath. I was parked in my usual spot near the edge of town, sipping a stale gas station coffee and scrolling through emails on my phone. At 1:47 a.m., the call came in. Unit 27, respond to 402 Miller Road. Caller reports a possible intruder. No further details provided. Miller Road was on the outskirts of town, a dead-end street lined with old Victorian houses that had seen better days. Most of the homes were abandoned, their windows boarded up, roofs sagging under the weight of time. The thought of an intruder in one of those decaying houses didn't seem far-fetched. Squatters, maybe, or kids looking for a place to party. I radioed back, Unit 27, en route. The drive took less than 10 minutes. As I pulled onto Miller Road, my headlights illuminated rows of skeletal trees swaying in the wind. The house at 402 was at the very end of the street, its silhouette stark against the moonlit sky. It was a classic Victorian, with a wraparound porch and gabled windows that stared out like empty eyes. The paint was peeling, the shutters hanging at odd angles. A single light burned in an upstairs window. I parked at the curb and stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots. The air was sharp with the smell of damp wood and earth. "Police?" I called, shining my flashlight toward the house. "Anyone inside?" Silence. I approached the porch, the wooden steps groaning under my weight. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly in the breeze. I drew my weapon and nudged the door open with my foot. "Police, if you're here, make yourself known." The house was dark, the air inside cold and stale. My flashlight beam cut through the shadows, revealing a narrow hallway lined with faded wallpaper. To my left was a living room, the furniture draped in yellowed sheets. To my right, a staircase spiraled upward, its banister thick with dust. The floor creaked beneath me as I stepped inside. "Hello?" I called again, my voice echoing down the empty hall. A faint sound drifted down from upstairs, a soft thud, followed by the creak of floorboards. My pulse quickened. "Who's there?" I shouted, aiming my flashlight toward the staircase. No response. I hesitated. Protocol said to wait for backup, but something compelled me to keep going. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the gnawing fear that someone upstairs needed help. The stairs protested loudly as I ascended, each step a sharp reminder of my presence. At the top, the hallway stretched out before me, lined with doors on either side. The light I'd seen from outside spilled from the last door on the left. I moved cautiously, clearing each room as I went: a bathroom, a bedroom, another bedroom, all empty. The only sound was the rhythmic creak of the floorboards beneath my boots. When I reached the last door, I paused. The light inside flickered faintly, like a dying bulb. I pushed the door open with my foot. The room was empty, save for a single wooden chair in the center. On the chair sat an old rotary phone, its receiver off the hook. The light came from a naked bulb dangling from the ceiling, its glow casting long, shifting shadows across the walls. As I stepped closer, the phone began to ring. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The ringing was sharp and insistent, cutting through the silence like a knife. I reached out, my hand trembling, and picked up the receiver. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice crackled through the line, faint and distorted. "Do you see me?" A chill ran down my spine. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice firmer now. The line went dead. I slammed the receiver down and turned to leave. But as I did, the bulb above me flickered violently and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the blackness. The chair was empty. My radio crackled to life, the dispatcher's voice strained and distant. "Unit 27, are you?" The rest was swallowed by static. "Dispatch, say again?" I barked into the radio. No response. I hurried out of the room, my flashlight trembling in my grip. The hallway seemed longer now, the doors closer together. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, darting just out of reach. As I descended the stairs, a new sound reached my ears, a faint, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from the front door. When I reached the bottom, I saw it, the door, now fully closed, rattling softly against its frame. I approached cautiously, every muscle in my body screaming to run. The tapping stopped as I reached for the doorknob. I yanked the door open, my flashlight spilling onto the porch. Nothing. The street was empty, the trees swaying in the wind. I turned back toward the house and froze. The hallway stretched impossibly long before me, the front door now miles away. At the far end stood a figure, its outline barely visible in the dim light. "Who's there?" I shouted, raising my weapon. The figure didn't move. I took a step forward, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The figure's head tilted, its face obscured by shadows. "Do you see me now?" The voice from the phone whispered, so close it felt like it was coming from inside my head. I don't remember how I got out of that house. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in my cruiser, the engine running, my hands gripping the wheel. Backup arrived minutes later, finding me pale and shaking. They searched the house but found no phone, no chair, no figure. The official report called it a false alarm. But I know what I saw, what I heard. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear that phone ringing, echoing in the back of my mind. I never thought I'd be one of those people with a story no one believes. A story I barely believe myself. It's been 3 months since it happened. And even now, sitting in my kitchen at 3 a.m., I can't shake the feeling that someone's watching me. But I'll start at the beginning, at the night that changed everything. My name's Officer Kevin Harlow, and I've been on the force for 6 years. I work in a small town, the kind of place where nothing much happens. Sure, we get the occasional bar fight or a shoplifter trying to snag a bottle of whiskey, but it's not exactly Chicago. That night was a Tuesday, quiet as they come. I was patrolling solo, driving my usual route past darkened storefronts and silent neighborhoods. I liked the solitude of night shifts, fewer calls, no traffic. It gave me time to think, though I'll admit I wasn't thinking about anything important that night, just debating whether I'd grab a burger or tacos after my shift ended. At 11:47 p.m., dispatch came through on the radio. Unit 15, report of a disturbance at Green Hollow Park. Caller states they heard shouting near the old maintenance shed. Green Hollow Park was on the edge of town, surrounded by dense woods. During the day, it was a nice spot for picnics or walking your dog. At night, though, it had an eerie vibe, pitch black, except for a single flickering streetlight at the entrance. The maintenance shed mentioned in the call was even creepier. It hadn't been used in years, just a rotting structure tucked away at the far end of the park. I radioed back, Unit 15 en route. By the time I arrived, the wind had picked up, rustling the trees like whispers. My headlights swept over the empty parking lot, the swings in the playground swaying gently. I parked, killed the engine, and grabbed my flashlight. "Police!" I called out, stepping onto the gravel path that led deeper into the park. "If anyone's here, make yourself known." No response. Just the wind and the crunch of gravel under my boots. The maintenance shed came into view, its wooden frame sagging under years of neglect. The door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly as it moved in the breeze. I shone my flashlight inside. "This is Officer Harlow. If you're in here, step out where I can see you." Nothing. I pushed the door open with my foot, the hinges groaning in protest. The interior was empty except for a few broken tools and an overturned bucket. The smell of damp wood and mildew filled my nose. Relief washed over me. Probably just a false alarm, a couple of teenagers messing around, or someone hearing raccoons and thinking it was more sinister. I radioed dispatch. Unit 15. "Shed's clear. No sign of anyone." "Copy that." 15, the dispatcher replied. I stepped back outside, ready to head to my car, when I heard it. A faint, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from the woods. I froze, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Hello?" I called, my voice steady but loud. The tapping stopped. My pulse quickened. I moved toward the sound, my flashlight sweeping the trees. Branches clawed at the beam like skeletal fingers. Then, I saw a figure standing just beyond the tree line, barely visible in the shadows. "Police, stay where you are," I shouted, my hand instinctively going to my holster. The figure didn't move. "Step into the light," I commanded, my voice firmer now. Nothing. I edged closer, my heart pounding. The figure's features became clearer. A man, tall and thin, wearing dark clothing. His face was obscured by the shadows, but I could feel his eyes on me. "Sir, I'm going to need you to—" Before I could finish, the figure turned and bolted into the woods. "Stop!" I yelled, sprinting after him. The underbrush snagged at my uniform as I ran, the beam of my flashlight bouncing wildly. The man was fast, his movements almost unnaturally fluid. I could hear him crashing through the brush ahead of me, but I couldn't close the distance. Suddenly, the noises stopped. I slowed to a halt, my chest heaving. The silence was suffocating, the kind that presses on your ears and makes you hyper-aware of your own breathing. "Sir?" I called, scanning the darkness. "This isn't a game. Come out now and we can talk." A low whisper cut through the air, so faint I almost thought I'd imagined it. "He's watching." My blood ran cold. "Who's watching?" I demanded, my flashlight darting through the trees. No answer. I backed up slowly, every instinct screaming at me to leave. The flashlight caught movement to my left, a glimpse of something pale darting between the trees. "Sir, this is your last warning," I shouted, drawing my weapon. The whisper came again, louder this time, and closer. "Run." I didn't hesitate. I turned and sprinted back toward the park, branches slapping at my face and arms. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows that seemed to reach for me. The wind howled, carrying with it faint, mocking laughter. When I finally burst into the parking lot, I half expected to see someone waiting for me, but it was empty, eerily still. I climbed in, locked the doors, and radioed dispatch. My voice shook as I explained what had happened, though I left out the whispers. They'd think I was crazy. Hell, I was starting to think I was crazy. The dispatcher sent another unit to meet me. When they arrived, we searched the woods together, but there was no sign of the man or anyone else. Back at the station, I filed my report. I kept it simple, responded to a call, found no intruder, possibly a false alarm. But I knew it wasn't that simple. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. At home, at work, even in my car, it was as if unseen eyes were always on me. Then the calls started. Every night, just after midnight, my phone would ring. When I answered, there was no one there. Just silence. I tried blocking the number, but it didn't help. The calls kept coming, always from a different number. One night, I let it go to voicemail. When I listened to the message, all I heard was a faint whisper, "Run." I don't patrol Green Hollow Park anymore. In fact, I avoid that part of town altogether. But it doesn't matter. Whatever I saw that night, whatever followed me out of those woods, it's still with me. And I don't think it's ever going to leave. I don't think anyone joins the police force expecting it to mess with their mind. Sure, we know the risks chasing criminals, breaking up fights, dealing with the worst humanity has to offer. But no one warns you about the quiet calls, the ones that seem routine until you're in too deep. It was a Tuesday night, just past 11 p.m., and my shift was dragging. I'd been on patrol for 6 hours, driving the same loops through town with nothing more exciting than a broken taillight to keep me awake. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio. "Unit 14, we've got a report of a possible disturbance at the old Fenton textile factory, 75 Browning Avenue. Caller says they heard voices." I sighed and clicked the radio. "Unit 14, en route." The Fenton factory had been shuttered for decades. Built in the 1922, it was once the town's pride, employing hundreds. But when the economy tanked in the 80s, it closed its doors, leaving behind broken windows, rusted machinery, and rumors of hauntings. Teenagers loved sneaking in, spray painting walls, and daring each other to spend the night. I figured this call would be another case of kids causing trouble. A little about me. My name's Alex Turner. I'm 32, single, and I've been a cop for 7 years. My dad was on the force before me, so I guess it's in my blood. I grew up in this town, which is both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, I know everyone. On the other, everyone knows me. That night, I wasn't expecting anything unusual. But looking back, I wish I'd turned off the radio and gone home early. The factory loomed in the darkness, its jagged silhouette stark against the cloudy sky. My headlights swept across the graffiti-covered walls and broken windows as I pulled into the gravel lot. The place had an eerie stillness, like the air itself was holding its breath. I radioed in my arrival and grabbed my flashlight. Dispatch Unit 14 on site. No signs of activity outside. Copy that. Unit 14. Proceed with caution. The front doors were chained shut, as they had been for years, but the side entrance hung ajar. The rusted metal groaned when I pushed it open, revealing a vast, shadowy space beyond. The air inside was heavy, thick with the smell of mildew and decay. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, as if the factory were amplifying the sound just to remind me how alone I was. "Police," I called out. "If anyone's here, make yourself known." Nothing. I started sweeping the area, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. Rows of rusting sewing machines sat like skeletons, their once busy needles frozen in time. The floor was littered with broken glass and scraps of metal, but no signs of recent activity. Probably a prank, I muttered to myself. But then I heard it, a faint whisper, just at the edge of hearing. I froze, my pulse quickening. It could have been the wind slipping through a broken window, but it didn't feel like that. It felt deliberate, like someone was trying to get my attention. "Hello," I called, shining my flashlight toward the sound. The beam landed on a stairwell leading to the upper levels. The paint on the walls was peeling, revealing patches of bare concrete beneath. "Police," I said again, more forcefully. "Come out now, and we can talk about this." No response. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. The second floor was even darker, the windows completely boarded up. My flashlight illuminated a long hallway lined with offices, their doors hanging off their hinges. The whisper came again, this time clearer. It sounded like a woman. I followed the sound to an office at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and the nameplate on it was too rusted to read. My flashlight revealed a desk, an overturned chair, and papers scattered across the floor, but no people. I stepped inside, scanning the room. My flashlight caught something on the wall, writing, scrawled in what looked like black marker. "Help me." The letters were uneven, frantic, and smeared as if someone had written them in a hurry. The whisper came again, louder now. "Help me." I spun around, my heart pounding, but the room was empty. That's when the door slammed shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot, and I lunged for the handle, yanking it open. The hallway was just as I'd left it, silent and empty. I radioed in. "Dispatch, this is Unit 14. I'm inside the Fenton factory. Possible intruder, request backup." "Copy Unit 14. Nearest unit is 15 minutes out." 15 minutes. I could handle that. I decided to head back downstairs and wait by the car. Whatever was going on here, I didn't want to deal with it alone. As I retraced my steps, the whispers started again, but this time they were everywhere. They overlapped, growing louder, filling the air with a cacophony of indistinct voices. "Help me. Can't escape. Don't leave." I broke into a run, my boots crunching on broken glass as I made for the stairwell. But when I reached it, the stairs were gone. I stopped short, staring in disbelief. The stairwell I'd climbed less than 20 minutes ago was now a solid wall. "No," I muttered, running my hands over the cold concrete. "No, no, no, no." The whispers grew louder, almost deafening now. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voices were inside my head, crawling under my skin. I stumbled back into the hallway, my flashlight flickering wildly. The air felt thicker, heavier, like the walls were closing in. Then I saw it, a shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, standing at the end of the hall. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but I could feel it watching me. "Stay back," I shouted, drawing my weapon. The shadow didn't react. "I mean it." I fired once, the gunshot echoing like a thunderclap. The shadow dissolved, melting into the darkness, but the whispers didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder, more insistent. I turned and ran, my only thought to get out of the building. But no matter which way I went, the halls seemed to stretch endlessly, looping back on themselves. Doors that had been open were now closed. Windows that should have shown the outside world revealed only blackness. I was trapped. By the time backup arrived, I was sitting in the middle of the factory floor, my flashlight dead, my gun empty. They found me mumbling to myself, surrounded by the whispers that only I could hear. "I don't work the force anymore. They say I had a breakdown, that the stress of the job finally got to me. But I know what I heard, what I saw. Sometimes late at night, I can still hear the whispers, and I know they're waiting for me to come back." The call came in at 2:17 a.m., the kind you don't forget. 911. What's your emergency? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fatigue creeping in after a long shift. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a woman's voice, barely above a whisper, "Help me, he's inside." Her words hit me like a jolt of electricity. I straightened in my chair and typed furiously to trace the call. "Ma'am, can you confirm your location?" Another pause, then, 1845 Pearson Street. "Please hurry." Her voice cracked, raw with fear, and then the line went dead. I glanced at my partner, Officer Ben Ramirez, who was nursing his third cup of coffee across the room. "We've got a possible intruder," I said, grabbing my radio. Ben sighed, setting his cup down. "Why is it always Pearson Street?" He wasn't wrong. Pearson was a stretch of older, rundown homes on the edge of town. Calls from that area usually meant squatters, petty theft, or someone seeing shadows after too many drinks. Still, this sounded different. A little about me. My name's Officer Rebecca Carter, 34 years old, and I've been with the force for almost a decade. I've seen my fair share of crazy calls, domestic disputes, drug busts, even a few homicide cases. But I've always prided myself on staying calm under pressure. This was no different, or so I thought. We arrived at the address a little after 2:30 a.m. The house was a two-story Victorian, the kind that might have been charming 100 years ago, but now looked like it belonged in a ghost story. Paint peeled off the siding, and a single porch light flickered weakly. "Looks abandoned," Ben muttered, stepping out of the squad car. I nodded, but kept my hand on my holster. Abandoned or not, someone had called us from here. "Police!" I called out, knocking on the door. The sound echoed unnervingly through the still night. "If anyone's inside, make yourself known." No response. Ben shrugged. Probably a prank, but I wasn't so sure. Something about the woman's voice had felt wrong, desperate. We pushed the door open, the old wood groaning in protest. Inside, the air was stale and heavy, carrying the faint smell of rot. The living room was sparse, just a few broken chairs and a stained sofa. "Split up," Ben suggested. I hesitated. The house wasn't that big, but something about the place made my skin crawl. Still, we had a job to do. "You take upstairs. I'll check the ground floor." The unease started as soon as Ben disappeared up the creaking staircase. My flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, revealing warped floorboards and water-stained walls. The kitchen was empty, save for a rusted fridge and a few mousetraps scattered on the counter. But as I turned to leave, I heard something, a faint creak, like someone shifting their weight. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing slightly. No answer. I walked back into the hallway, my heart beating a little faster. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. A door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar. A faint light flickered behind it, casting long shadows. "Ben?" I called out, but my voice came out quieter than I intended. No response. I approached the door, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. Pushing it open, I found myself in a small, dimly lit room. A single bulb swung gently from the ceiling, casting erratic shadows on the walls. In the center of the room was a rotary phone on an old wooden table. I stared at it, confused. The phone's receiver was off the hook, dangling by its cord. A faint static buzzed from the earpiece. Then I saw the writing, scrawled on the walls in uneven, jagged letters, "Do not answer." My stomach dropped, but before I could process it, my radio crackled to life. "Rebecca, you need to see this." It was Ben, his voice tight. "Where are you?" I asked, already heading back into the hallway. "Upstairs, first room on the left." The stairs groaned under my weight as I climbed, each step feeling heavier than the last. The hallway upstairs was darker, the only light coming from the moon filtering through a broken window. I found Ben in the bedroom, standing near the window with his back to me. "What's going on?" I asked, stepping inside. He didn't answer. "Ben?" Slowly, he turned around. His face was pale, his eyes wide with something I couldn't quite place: fear, confusion. "You need to see outside," he whispered. I moved to the window and looked out. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The squad car was still parked in the driveway, but something was off. The headlights were on, and in their glow, I saw movement shadows shifting unnaturally, circling the car like predators. "What the hell is that?" I breathed. Before Ben could answer, the bedroom door slammed shut behind us. The next few moments were a blur. We tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. My radio crackled again, but all I could hear was static mixed with faint whispers. Ben backed away from the door, his hand on his gun. "This isn't normal, Rebecca." "No kidding," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. Then the whispers grew louder, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing heavier with each passing second. "Rebecca," Ben said suddenly, his voice shaking. I turned to see him staring at the corner of the room. At first, I saw nothing, but then, slowly, a figure began to take shape, a woman, her face obscured by shadows, her body unnaturally still. She raised a hand, pointing at me. My breath caught in my throat. "We need to get out of here." The whispers reached a crescendo, and the lights flickered violently. I grabbed Ben's arm, yanking him toward the door. This time, it opened easily, spilling us into the hallway. We didn't stop running until we were outside. The squad car was untouched, no sign of the shadows we'd seen earlier. "Drive," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. We didn't file a report about what happened. Officially, it was just another prank call, but Ben and I both knew better. A week later, I checked the records for 1845 Person Street. The house had been abandoned for years. The last resident, a woman who'd been found dead in the basement, murdered by an intruder. Her name was never released to the public, but I'll never forget the voice on the phone. It was hers.